So, all right then. Apparently, I'm back on. I have connectivity issues. Sorry about the interruption. Part one was short, part two will also be short. But I do want to voice my objections to something that I saw in that video I mentioned in part one that talked about how evil people will lie and manipulate and only be there when they need you and things of that nature, because it went on to say things like it's in their blood and they'll never change. And I couldn't disagree more. There's nothing more untrue than the old adage, people don't change. Because in my experience, and I've been here for well over half a century, people most certainly do. And in point of fact, people must. People don't change, they don't survive. Everybody thinks Darwin talked about competition a lot. And he did, but it turns out when you do the deep reading and you read it quite a lot of what Charles Darwin had to say about humanity and evolution and survival of species in general, he actually stressed cooperation and adaptation over competition. Darwin himself said that the clarion call of survival is the ability to adapt to change and the ability to cooperate with members of your own species as well as the other species in the planet itself. And I think that's really profound because we live in a culture that just appropriated that idea of competition and kind of left what he said about cooperation and adaptation dormant. We need to grab onto those concepts now, especially the cooperation part. I saw someone change years ago, decades ago, a young woman who had grown up with a younger sister that she didn't like. She was jealous of the younger sister by her own admission. Uh, the younger sister made perfect grades and was a tall blonde kid and popular and confident, whereas the older sister uh, did not feel that she was as attractive and certainly didn't do nearly as well at school. But over the course of time, she realized that she was going to move away, and the younger sister would be more than 1,000 miles away at that time. So rather than have enmity across the miles, literally overnight, I'm not joking, people, literally overnight, this young woman, uh, not even out of her teens yet, had some kind of epiphanal transformation and came to the younger sister, started talking about their past history of problems once she left home. And fortunately, to her credit, the younger sister said, cool, let's do that. And basically, overnight, the relationship between those two people who had lived together for, I think, about 11 years had just transformed into something really beautiful. And it essentially stayed that way over the course of their adulthood. Uh, they have remained friends. And that would not have happened if people didn't change. I saw recently, just within the last year, someone who initially seemed like a highly intelligent, deeply compassionate, empathic, philosophical person, doing good in the world as much as he could, get tempted by some really negative processes in his life. From what I understand, he may have been threatened. He was definitely tempted, but he almost went in retrograde and behaved like a junior high school kid. Um, decades after junior high school had was long and gone, and he even admitted he wanted to be popular with the cool kids. But what I saw in his attempts to be popular with the cool kids, and they're like in their 50s and 60s, was someone who was skating on some awfully thin ice. And I saw somebody whose literal immortal soul was at risk because he was succumbing to possibly some threats, but definitely some temptations that were extremely dangerous and unwholesome and could have destroyed his family, his career, his physical health, and his trajectory in life. Well, apparently he saw some of my videos, and apparently some conversations that he and I had with other people had some kind of deep meaning for him, and it struck a chord. We found the lost chord in his soul. And the last time I saw him, I was really impressed. I was so fulfilled and so grateful because his immortal soul was secure and found. And he had matured a lot from the experience. You wouldn't expect someone that at that age to go through, the sucker punch of being bullied by what amounts to folks behaving like junior high school kids, but he did temporarily, but yet he triumphed over basically losing his dignity, his intelligence, his philosophical nature, his obligations to do the right thing. And it was really, really a joy to see people do change. And sometimes rather drastically, back and forth, willy nilly, in a very short time. I've also seen some other people change recently, and I really can't tell you how much this means to me. But some folks who, although I've never really thought of myself as someone who has mortal enemies, seemed for all the world like just exactly that. Uh, Basically had their hearts touched and basically decided they didn't want to be constantly on the side of wrong, doing the wrong thing, believing the wrong thing, believing the wrong thing. They questioned their assessments, they questioned their own behavior, they questioned their own value system. And they came out, their dignity and their integrity and their ability to adapt and change, with new circumstances does seem to be secure. And I cannot tell you how much this means to me, how gratifying this is. Um, the extent to which these two people have changed by mutual agreement because they're partners um, is literally one of the most fulfilling and beautiful things I personally have ever seen in my life. And I'm willing to forgive a lot of transgressions as long as they continue to do the right thing and they try to seek redemption and give back what they've taken. To the extent that they can give back what they've taken from others, I believe that they will try. Many, many years ago, I knew a brilliant man. I mean, this was decades ago, but I knew one of the smartest people in the whole world. It was like knowing Alexander Graham Bell or Thomas Edison or Albert Einstein. And yet he, like a lot of highly intelligent people, was a person, he had a psychology, he had a soul using a mind, using a body, and the body, like everybody else's, was subject to chemical addiction. He was an alcoholic. And he was what they call a really bad alcoholic who probably would have died young of alcohol related diseases if he hadn't changed. But there was a point in his life when the trumpet blared and he knew that if he didn't stop drinking, he was going to lose his family. He had 4 children, he had a wife, and he had a career, none of which he wanted to lose. So somehow, in spite of the ravages of what alcohol addiction can do to the brain, in spite of the immense cravings, in spite of all the challenges, that man found a way home. And that man gave up drinking in order to keep his children, his wife, his home, his career. And he lived for decades. He lived into his 70s, I believe. And he was always grateful for what he had done. So were the people around him. Because when he stopped hiding behind the wall of addiction and he opened up, he was this fabulously brilliant man. So, like I said, the reason I didn't say or share or try to proselytize for the cause of the other video about how evil people lie and manipulate and only are around when they need you is because all that may be true, but people most certainly do change. And if I had any good news, if I had any great gift to give you, it would be that today. So take that gift from the heart of love. People change. In fact, people must. This is Nancy Love, Planet Peace Woman. More later.